So today's training should be relatively quick. I just wanted to outline the Section 8 process for you guys, just so if someone comes along wanting to rent a property using their Section 8 voucher, you guys will know exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So without further ado, we're just going to cover it. So a couple important things to know when you're going to work with Section 8 clients or Section 8 or rent a property out to Section 8 is that the biggest thing is Section 8 is considered an additional income source. Section 8 is not a type of person. It's not a type of property. It will be an inaccurate statement to say those are Section 8 houses. I guess where that gets misconstrued is a lot of investors will purchase properties or even build properties with the purpose of making them affordable housing just so they can rent to Section 8 agencies. The reason they'll do that is just for an increased level of consistency as far as rent payments. Just because the rent payments are going to be more consistent, it doesn't mean the tenant is going to be more consistent. So you still want to have to do your screenings on these tenants. If someone were to call and ask about your listing, asking, hey, does your listing accept Section 8? It's never going to be a yes or no question, because for you to just flat out say no, you're discriminating against someone's income source. So what happens is, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, it came out where a lot of people started complaining that Section 8, well, people using Section 8 vouchers couldn't find housing just because people were turning them away strictly for the voucher. It had nothing to do with their credit, their eligibility for the property. A lot of these people even had 700 credit scores, but just because they wanted to use the Section 8 vouchers, they weren't allowed to move into these places. So if you're caught flat out turning someone away just because they're using Section 8, it could be considered discrimination. They could hire a lawyer and they can and likely will sue you and your brokerage. So be very careful when you're turning away people for Section 8. What I always say is everyone's willing to apply. And if you want to weed out a property to know if it will work with Section 8 or not, you really just want to know if they have an income requirement or a credit requirement. If there is a minimum income, more often than not, it won't work out, just because they'll usually say like 50,000 a year, 40,000 a year. And the housing benefits are actually calculated based on your income. So just finding out what the minimum income is, what the minimum credit score is, as long as your client meets that with the association, whether they're using Section 8 or not, it's okay. They can go ahead and go for that property. Before anyone can move into any Section 8 property or any property using a Section 8 voucher, the property has to pass a inspection. It's not the same inspection as if you were, say, selling a property where, you know, those inspections, they take like 45 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. This one, it's really in and out. It'll probably take about 10 to 15 minutes. They actually give you a checklist of exactly what they're going to come and look for, so you can do your own walkthrough and just make sure the property is going to qualify. We'll go more in detail on that in another slide. But the inspection is probably the most important part of the Section 8 process. If the property is not in good condition, it won't go Section 8. That's just flat out the way it is. If a lot of things can be wrong, but the inspection, they're going to be the most tedious about. If there is an association, meaning there's a homeowners association, a condo association, any association that's going to want to screen your tenant before allowing them to move in, the housing authority will not schedule their inspection until after you've received association approval. The reason is they don't want to waste their inspector's time by having them go out, inspect the unit, everything's ready to go, and then the association denies the tenant because maybe there was an income or a credit requirement that we didn't know about. So they want to see that the tenant is approved by both the owner and the association before they start doing what they have to do. As far as they're looking through everything and scheduling inspections, I would say their process is probably going to take maybe a week. I would say 2 weeks more often than not, a week on a fast time. So Section 8 move-ins do take a little longer than a traditional move-in, just because of that inspection being the extra step after the association approval is done. So where am I? Okay. Like I was saying before, just because they have these Section 8 vouchers, meaning a good portion, if not all the rent is going to be guaranteed, that doesn't mean they don't have to go through a screening process. They're still going to have to submit a credit check, a background check, and income verification. The reason is because housing, they don't really care about your credit score or your income. Well, they care about your income, but it won't make or break their decision on giving you a voucher. You can have a felony conviction and still get Section 8. thought process is, as long as you get an owner to be okay with moving you in, we're game. So as an owner or as a listing agent, you want to be sure that you're looking at everyone's credit profile, even though they're Section 8. Because just because the rent's guaranteed, you still have to worry about maybe they were evicted from the last property just for violating lease terms. Maybe they damaged the properties. Maybe they had an excessive amount of people living with them. Maybe they had animals that they weren't supposed to. So you never really know. So I definitely do a full screening, talk to their previous landlord, and just see why is it they're moving as the listing agent or the landlord. If you're working with the tenant as the tenant's agent, I just always like to do my screening up front. I ask for a credit check, background check, and income check. As far as income, you want the last 2 months of bank statements or the last 4 pay stubs. They have to have their name and the date within the last 90 days. If it's older than 90 days, it's going to be too old and the owner's not going to want it. So, and the last thing, tenants Section 8 doesn't always pay the whole rent. So let's just say the rent is $2,000 a month. Depending on how much the tenant makes per year or per month, that's how they assess how much help they need. So every year they recalculate the tenant's income and every year they reassess their situation. And based on how much they make, housing just fills in the void. So if I'm not mistaken, I think they try to keep it around 30% of their income. Don't quote me on that exact amount. That part we don't really need to know because they're going to tell you exactly what the breakdown is. So you don't need to calculate anything, but it's about 30%. So anything above that, they'll say it's too expensive. They can't afford it and they won't let them move into it. All right. A couple other things to know. When they're moving in, it's not going to be like a traditional rental where they're going to pay first, last, and security. Because Section 8 pays via direct deposit every month for all 12 months, including the last month of the lease, they don't allow tenants to pay last month's rent. What I do is if the owner absolutely insists I have to have 3 months rent just for the sake of affording to pay the commission, I write it as a first month's rent and a 2-month security deposit. That way, when the tenant moves out, they can get at least both of those months back versus it being last month's rent and then who knows what happens to it. So that's just how I write it. Oh, feel free to stop me at any time if anyone has questions, by the way, because I'm just gonna fly through this thing. So as far as how they pay, in the packet, they're gonna ask for the owners like they need their bank statements, their account number, routing number, like a direct deposit form. They fill it out, and every month between the 1st and the 15th, I'm sorry, not the 15th, the 1st and the 5th, they're automatically going to send that deposit. So the reason I say the 1st and the 5th is not the same day every month. 1 month you're going to check it and on the 1st it's in there. Another month you check it and on the 3rd, but it's never beyond the 5th. And I have yet to experience them missing a month. I've managed properties myself for a few years and I've received these Section 8 payments and they're always on time every time. The thing is, you're still going to have to follow up with the tenant and make sure they pay their portion of rent. So let's just say the tenant's only responsible for $150 of the rent and housing paid their bulk of it. So you're only short $150. You still have to send a 3-day notice as a landlord, or you still have to pursue with the eviction process for that portion of rent that the tenant paid. It's their responsibility. And it's not a situation where the tenant doesn't pay, you just call housing and they make them pay. Housing doesn't care. That's between you and the tenant. All housing is going to do is if you report an issue to them, they notate it on the tenant file and they consider all this in when they're reevaluating the tenant profile. So it's usually in their best interest to kind of keep up with the properties and keep the landlords happy because it's kind of a good thing that they'll mess up. Where was I? Okay. As far as while on the note of these payments, the first payment, just because they have to process it, if you get everything in time, like let's just say you finished everything 2 weeks or 3 weeks before moving, you should be okay. But let's just say everything is finalized and the inspection is done like a day or two before the proposed move-in date, they're not going to have time to set this up and get that direct deposit out to the owner's account by the 1st. Their direct deposits are all systemized. So at the same time, every month they shoot them out. If I'm not mistaken, they do a first of the month draw. And then for everyone that kind of moved in the middle of the month, on the 15th, they do another deposit. This does vary based on which housing authority, because each county, each city has its own. There's the Fort Lauderdale Housing Authority, the Miami-Dade Housing Authority, Palm Beach, Broward. So you never really know what their situation is until you see where they're coming from and what housing authority they're with. As far as who they'll pay, they have to only give it to the owner of the property. They will ask you to submit a copy of the deed or something showing that you are the owner, or the property management company, and they'll ask to see the management agreement to verify that you manage this property. Because remember back on the note where we said you can't prepay last, it's only first in a 2-month security deposit. Commissions can't be paid out of security deposits. That's just under law. You can't use security deposit funds to pay a commission. Some brokerages will do it. They'll just pay it and then get it from the owner. I don't know how they do it, but realistically speaking, if the first month's rent hasn't been paid yet by housing and the only money we have is security deposit funds, technically your commission can't be paid until the owner gets that first month's rent from housing and they have enough to pay you out. Otherwise, they have to pay you out of their pocket, and when they get their check, they could reimburse it. That part is really up to whatever the listing agent and owner have agreed on, but just make sure you're notifying the owner, just letting them know the situation, that they have to wait up to a month to expect their first check, just so they're not freaking out at the last minute thinking you guys are trying to get over on them. Like I said before, this is a really important thing because discrimination suits are real. Do not call around agents asking, do you accept Section 8? And if someone calls you asking, do you accept Section 8? Oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, but it's a known thing that there's people going around as testers. And what they do is they call brokerages and agents and say, hey, do you take Section 8 on this listing? And they're waiting on you to say, no, no Section 8. And then they're calling their lawyer on the very next line. So just always answer, do you accept Section 8? All are welcome to apply, but here are our approval requirements. You have to have definitive approval requirements. Either you meet this or you don't meet this. You can't just turn them away strictly because of their source of income. It's equivalent to saying, because you're a police officer, I don't want to rent to you. Because you're a stripper, I don't want to rent to you. You can't do that. They're not breaking any laws. They're not putting you at any risk by doing this. So obviously it can't be a deciding factor. If their income is okay, their credit profile is okay, their background is okay, their last landlord checks out, everything checks out, the funds are there, rent it to them. The government especially doesn't like it because they're trying to do something and you're kind of counteracting them. So here's how it works. Here's the process. It's a relatively easy thing. The real only difference between Section 8 and the traditional move-in is going to be the inspection, because on a rental, you're not really used to doing an inspection, just a walkthrough. So here's how it works. The first thing, the tenant gets their voucher from their caseworker in the housing authority. The voucher is this huge packet. It's about like 15, maybe 20 pages long. And in it, it's going to have pages for the tenant to fill out and pages for the landlord to fill out. Also in it, it's going to tell them, okay, here's a list of zip codes. You may have 30 zip codes in there because each zip code is going to have a different average housing market. And their goal is to make sure wherever you're moving to, we want to make sure you can afford to live there. So that's why they may pay $3,000 a month for a 4.2 and 33028 and only $2,500 a month for a 4.2 and 33024, because they know houses are cheaper here. We don't need to give you that much money over here, but you do need more to live over here. They'll never say you can only live in this area. They'll say, look, go wherever you can get, and in these areas, here's how much we'll give you. The amount increases based on how many bedrooms they have, and it increases if the owner is willing to add water or electricity to rent. The more utilities included, the more they're willing to pay, because it's the less their tenant has to pay. Also, it's going to give you a deadline. They only have usually about 90 days to find a property. If they don't, their voucher expires and they have to try to get an extension. If they run out of extensions and can't get the voucher used by a landlord, they lose their housing, and it's just on to the next. So it's really crucial for them. Oftentimes people using Section 8, they really are adamant about finding a house. They will rarely just kind of, move on and ignore it. Oftentimes they have multiple realtors though, just because of how hard it is to place a Section 8 tenant, because a lot of landlords and agents are just so ill-informed on the process. It's really up to us to kind of understand it and be able to teach so that we can put more people at ease and get more people in homes. So once they find a property, They get the offer accepted by the landlord. Thanks to you guys, the agents. They draft the lease. The thing is, housing, they don't want the lease to get signed and executed by all parties until after they've reviewed it, done their inspection, and say, okay, yes, we can move in. The curveball in that is most associations, if there is one, they won't do their screening until the lease is executed. So you have the association saying we won't start until this lease is executed, and housing saying we're not starting because that lease is executed. So what I do in that instance is I draft the lease, and in the additional terms, I put this lease is contingent on successful inspection. So that just kind of unlocks it, even though it's signed. If it fails inspection, it falls through. But also another risk to that is because they don't give you the move-in date until after inspection, you could have a start date on the lease. Then they pass inspection and authorize you to move in, but then that date's passed and now you're already in breach of the lease. So that's why they want it unexecuted. But if you absolutely have to execute it up front, just do it and maybe just send an unexecuted version to housing after you get the approval. But that's kind of a tricky situation. I would probably just call me when you have that situation and I'll walk you through it to make sure we're clear. Like I was saying, if it is required, apply to the association because housing will not do anything without that approval. If it's needed, they will ask you. Once you have that, the tenant and the landlord both fill out their respective pages in the packet. So like I said, the packet's about 14, 15, maybe 20 pages. And in that, it's going to say, okay, here's a page for the landlord to fill out. Here's a page for the tenant. Here's a page for both. And you have to make sure every spot is filled out and signed by every party needed. Otherwise, they'll send it right back. And it's not a simple process. You can't just email this to them. They need the original document. So you literally have to have the tenant fill out their pages, sign it, take the same packet to the landlord, have them fill out their pages, sign it. And then me as the agent, I like to just look through it myself and just make sure, okay, everything is filled out. All the documents they're asking for are attached and we look good. Because once you turn it in, they have to go to the housing authority, take their name down in the waiting list, wait in the lobby, get called by their caseworker who's already overwhelmed with a ton of people in there asking questions. Then she reviews it, says she doesn't like it, sends it back. And now you got to do it again. And they need another appointment to go back. And it slows you down so much, the slightest things. So once you turned in, they're going to review it. They don't review it then and there. They'll kind of go through it and say, okay, we're good. But then once you or your tenant leaves the housing authority, then they'll schedule their inspection. So once they schedule inspection, the inspector is going to call either the owner directly or the listing agent. They ask who we're contacting. They're going to call you. They may give you a day's notice, a couple of days notice and say, hey, we're going to come do the inspection this day it's like a city furniture delivery. They're not going to say we'll be there at 3. They'll say I'll be there sometime between 7 a.m. and 12, like noon. So you literally have to sit there and be there that whole time and just hope for the best, because if you miss them, you missed them and you got to get a whole nother appointment, probably a whole nother week away. Yes. Okay. So after the inspection is done, they'll say, all right, good inspection. They'll sign off on it. They'll authorize you to move in. They'll allow you to execute the lease, and they'll say, okay, put the start date as this date and the end date at this date. The reason it's important for your lease start date to line up with what they have is because when the lease is time for renewal, they're going to send their inspector out again to make sure the tenant kept up with the property and the landlord kept up with the property. If one of the other is not holding up with their end of the bargain, Section 8 will terminate this lease and make the tenant move. They'll say you have to find another property. This one isn't working out. Or they'll say you don't take care of these properties. We're not. You know, they reassess it every single year. They reassess their income. They reassess the property. Another thing on this note, when it comes to affordability, a lot of landlords will try to send offers like way higher. They'll try to spike the rent super high for Section 8. But housing, they have a method of doing their own comps. So if they see a 3-2 that's normally $2,000 a month, but for some reason you're asking them for $3,000 a month, they'll flag it and shut it down. They'll deny it. So you can't just shoot out whatever offer you want. It has to be reasonable. Okay, wonderful. So like I said, after the inspection, you can move in, you can execute the lease. And at that time, they set up the direct deposit for the owner. Hopefully it's done by the time they move in, but more often than not, the owner will have to wait until that next month, the next time they're sending payments out, and they'll pay a double payment. They'll pay the lease start date and whatever that following month is. So they'll get double payments that day. So it's not like they'll lose out on anything. After that, you just conduct the walkthrough and the tenant exchanges their portion of the funds. So their security deposit, their portion of first month's rent, whatever else it is they agreed to pay, and they get keys. That's whether the housing authority sent their first wire to the owner's account and you got your commission or not. They did their part. The lease is executed. There's no more pending contingencies. We've already established that the housing's first payment may take up to 30 days. We already established we can't take a commission from a security deposit. So they get their keys once it's done. All right. As far as finding properties, this is where a lot of people tend to have a hard time, because you're stuck on the thought process that Section 8 is a type of property. So what I do is, once they tell me they have their packet, I ask for either the whole packet. I don't get the whole packet too early in the game, because if it does not work out with this tenant and me, I have to give that whole packet back. They only get one and they can't get a copy. Also, remember, it's 20 pages, so they're not going to send you, a photocopy of it. So it's that one asset. So ask for a copy of just the page that outlines their budget. It'll have like 30 zip codes and how much they'll give them per zip code. Look at that. Have them fill out an application, because I like to have everything ready to go up front, because I like to move fast. If I show them properties, we see something we like, I like to just know I have everything I need to present this offer. I could go right home or just stop on my computer, fill it out, they sign it, and I'm ready to submit it. Also, it allows me to see, okay, here's their background check, here's their credit score. So here's their income. So if I see a property that says a minimum credit score 650, I can look at their credit profile and see if they meet that or not. If they don't, I omit it and I move on to the next. If they do meet it, great, we can go see it. Also, everyone in the house who has income, I like to factor their income in, because again, if it has a minimum income, that's household. So it all adds up and it all really helps your application package. And the copy of ID for everyone over 18. It's just because it just makes the offer package complete. They're going to need it. They're going to ask for it. So I just try to send them as much stuff that I know they're going to need up front, so they can reduce having to ask me. And just, if it's up to me and another offer, they're probably going to go with the most complete package. So then once you have everything you need, start your MLS search and just plug in all the zip codes. If you remember the MLS training, you see the part where you can plug in and search by zip code. Or just draw a big map search if you know zip codes and know where they are. However you choose to do this search, that's another class for another date. Time out. While we're on subjects, all the classes and trainings that I've been doing, I have a log of videos, and I'm actually going to incorporate in the website a page for agents. So on there, you're going to just be able to go over and search for every single training we've ever done, and just kind of brush up on whatever the topic, and ask me any questions if you come up on them. Back to the training. So once you have your list of properties or a list of options, send them to the tenant, see which ones they like, and then from there, you just want to take the options that they like and just verify with the owners or the associations if there's a minimum income or credit score requirements. The difference is, if an owner or the listing agent themselves is the one saying, we want this credit score, we want this income, you can get around that. If the association is saying our requirement is X minimum income or X minimum credit score, you can't get around that. I say that because the association bylaws, those are black and white. They're trained, if they see this application come by, they will deny it. The owner, they're just trying to protect themselves. So as long as the association is okay, the owner, you can offer them a little more money per month, because more money technically reduces their risk factor, because then it's worth it. So all the, you can offer a larger security deposit. There's ways to get around the owner saying something, but there's no way to get around the association saying something. So always verify who's saying this. If there is a minimum requirement, find out who it's coming from. If it's not from the association, you can still try to show that property and send a very strong offer and get it. Okay, and like I was saying, when it comes to calculating that minimum monthly income, take everyone's monthly income, add it together, and whatever the amount of their voucher assistance, add that to that monthly income. Show them the best options and send strong, fast, and well-written offers. You have to be fast because there's an inventory shortage, and this may be the first property your tenant shown, but it's probably the 17th property another tenant seen. So definitely be quick. And if an agent sees a poorly written offer, it kind of gives them the idea that the agent doesn't know what they're doing, and no one wants to put up with having to deal with a brand new landlord, a brand new tenant, and a brand new agent. That, you know what I'm saying? So just really portray that you know what you're doing by sending a well-written and structured offer. Things to note in your offer. So when you're writing an offer, these are the few things that when you're doing Section 8, you just want to make sure you include in it to make sure you're covered. So like I was saying, because housing is going to pay the all 12 months via direct deposit, there's no last month up front. But if the owner insists on getting 3 months worth of rent, I write it up as a first month's rent and a 2-month security deposit. So my client would pay whatever their portion of first month's rent is, and then they would pay the full 2-month security deposit, because remember, housing does not pay security. They only pay rent. Security comes from the tenant. So you have to make sure your client has that money on hand ready to go before you even start showing it. Because if you show them something and they like it and you get it, but they don't have the money to hold it, what are you going to do with it? And as far as what to put in your contract, on the last page of the offer, the contract to lease, there's like I think it says additional terms. And in there, I write, you can probably take a screenshot of this, but again, I'm going to give you this training. Tenants using housing authority voucher towards rent payments paid via monthly ACH deposit. That's like a direct deposit. I think it's ACH. Is it AHC? Whatever that the right term for that is, put it. Lease contingent on successful inspection. Let the owner know up front. We have to get through an inspection. First month's ACH or AHC deposit may take up to 30 days to process. I put this in the offer because I personally, as long as the association does not have a minimum credit or income requirement that's going to wipe my client out as far as a contender for this property, I rarely call and even tell them my client's using Section 8. The way they find out my client's using Section 8 is when they go to the last page of this offer and see these terms, and they be like, oh, okay, this is a Section 8 offer. Because by that time, they've already got through the whole offer and they're okay. They're like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, they're Section 8, because they've seen the application, they've seen the income, they've seen everything check out, and then they find out it's Section 8. So I find that to be the best way to get them in. Just make sure they qualify as people, because they are people, and get the deal done. Also, just kind of getting all this out of the way up front really makes for a more smoother transaction, because the owner knows what to expect. They're less on edge because they're going to be every step of the way like, where's my money? Where's my money? If they have to go back out for another inspection and there's a week delay, where's my money? If something's missing in the packet, like someone forgot to sign one page and they send it back, that's all they're worried about is where's my money. So let that show you that mostly all problems can be solved by money. All right. Did I go through the slide? Yes, I did. Okay, so offer acceptance tips. So you written your offers, you sending them out, they keep getting denied. Here are some things you could do to make sure your offer is received a little better. So the biggest thing you can do is offer more per month, because investors, all they care about is their money. All they care about is their cap rate or their return on investment. So offering even $10 or $50 more a month, that increases their return on investment. That takes them from a 10% cap rate to an 11% cap rate maybe. So stuff like that, other people may not be willing to do. And as long as it's within range for the neighborhood and your client's voucher can afford it, by all means, because they're not going to have to pay all of that out of pocket. Their portion of rent is just going to be restructured to fit it. So they're just going to pay a percentage more of that. And more often than not, they're willing to do it. A larger security deposit. That's a great way to offer, to make a stronger offer package. And it makes the owner feel like they're getting more money without the tenant giving them more money, because that money, the larger security deposit, is going to come back when the tenant leaves, So more money per month, that money is gone. The tenant doesn't get it back. A larger security deposit, the owner feels like they got more because they're holding more, but it's more they have to get back. Letters of recommendation is a great way to kind of put an owner at ease because all they're really looking at is numbers and background checks, and it's hard to make judgments on that. The slightest thing, they just freak out. So a letter of recommendation from number one, their previous landlord is probably the most effective. To their employers, you can also do like friends and family, but they don't hit as hard as previous landlords and employers. It just shows like consistency and it just makes them feel better. Include the background check, credit check, and income check, just because it kind of fills the whole image of who these people are, and it just leaves less to wonder because a lot of agents will send an offer without any of this, and then the owner is still going to have to do their screening, and then they got 3 offers with no screening, and they don't know which one they like better. The fact that yours has it all in there, it kind of, they feel like they know the person better and they're more comfortable trusting that offer. Oftentimes people will try to move into, let's just say, a 2-2 with 5 people. That's too many. If it's a 2-2 with 6 people, that's too many. The goal is 2 heartbeats per bedroom. It's not 100% illegal, but there is an act that was enacted to protect landlords who wanted to make this, what would I call this, requirement. So if a landlord says, I don't want that many people in my house, I want up to 2 people per room, that's fine. It's also safe because imagine there's 7 people in a 2-bedroom. The AC can't handle that. The plumbing for the bathrooms can't handle that because that one bathroom is not designed for 7 people. I think that is where we go into functional obsolete. Y'all went to real estate school. You know what I'm talking about. You never had to use that word in real estate. I don't know why we had to learn it, but here it is. Okay. Like I keep stressing, well-written and well-presented offer packages really help because if your offer looks like crap, they're going to assume you're going to treat this transaction like crap. They really want to know that you know what you're doing. So just showing a strong, well-written offer just kind of puts the listing agent at ease. And number 7, show knowledge and understanding of the process. It goes hand in hand with number 6 because if they see, okay, they're gonna be like, okay, you know what? Caleb's got it covered. Caleb knows exactly what he's doing. He's very knowledgeable. He's explaining the process to me. He's telling me upfront, look, your first payment is gonna come, but you may have to wait 30 days. Look, we have to do inspection, but don't worry. Here's the inspection report. Here's a checklist of everything they're gonna inspect. I'm gonna sit with you the day before. We're gonna go through it, make sure we're good, fix what we need to fix, and we're gonna pass that inspection with flying colors. So you let them know, here's what's coming up. And then you reiterate, and then here's how I'm going to make sure we're prepared for what's coming up. As long as you make them feel a little comfortable about that, they should be more susceptible. Is that a good word for this? They should be more susceptible to working with you and doing this Section 8 deal. Because like I said, it's just like any other deal. It's just you got to get through an inspection. Granted, if I'm renting out a property, hopefully it should pass an inspection because I want it to be safe. They're doing the inspection not to be nitpicky to make sure you got, let me not try to give examples because I can't think of any, but they're just doing this to make sure if the person moving in has a family, if they have children, especially if we're paying their rent, we as in the housing authority, we want to make sure this is a safe property. We don't want people to just have to move into whatever they can get just because of their situation. And this is the only person they could find to accept Section 8. We want to make sure that kids aren't going to cut their feet on top. We want to make sure that, so it's all about making sure that the property is safe and livable before anything else. So they don't really care to say, oh, you know what? We don't like this yellow paint painted white. They're not going to do that. They're just going to make sure it's safe. All right. So last slide, most important part of the process, the inspection. Here's what you need to know, and here's how to get ready for it. The inspection checklist can be found online. I didn't attach one because each housing authority has their own inspection checklist and they're gonna have different things that they're looking for. Once you get that checklist, you can print it out. Do a walkthrough beforehand. So just go to the property with the checklist and you yourself can be the inspector. They're not gonna do anything different. They're just gonna walk around with the same checklist and check off whatever they see is right or notate whatever they see is wrong. So if you go through with the same checklist, make sure all outlets are good, everything is good, you should be good. All right. At the time of inspection, remember, they're going to give you a window. They're going to say, I'll be there between 9 and 7, 12 and 4, something crazy. I don't know what they're going to tell you, but someone has to be there. You cannot give them a lockbox. They will not open it. They will not enter a property without someone present. These are all things that I personally failed inspections for. So they told me once we'll be there between 7 and 12. I thought I was slick. I'm like, there's no way they're gonna be there at the crack of dawn. So I got there around 8. Guess what? They came, they left. I got a notice. I'm sitting there all day, and they say, well, sir, we went at 7:15. And you get what I'm saying? So I had to wait a whole week for them to come back. It's just not worth it. Another thing to note, if the property is on a super lockbox, the electronic lockbox, make sure there is not a timed access on it. An issue I had, it was the day after daylight savings. So the inspection was 8 a.m., but the lockbox thought it was 7 a.m. The lockbox at this particular listing had a timed access where it would not allow anyone in it between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So because of that, it was locked. So I'm sitting there with the inspector trying to get in. I can't open it. I'm trying to call the listing agent because I'm there as the tenant's agent. They're not picking up because they're at the gym for their morning workout. So it was a horrible experience. I'm sitting there for 20 minutes. He says, look, we'll reschedule. He just drives off. I'm an hour away from home, so I just drive back sad and defeated. Make sure you can get in. So by the time he came back, it brings us to slide 4. If the power was off, ensure that AC has time to cool before inspection. When he came back the following week to do this inspection, I finally got in. The lockbox situation was corrected. They had the power turned back on in the nick of time for inspection. And I walk in the house and I had to turn the AC on because it was off all this time. Because of that, he's not going to wait for the AC to cool off. He put a little thermometer up to it, said this AC blows too hot, and failed our inspection and had to come back the following week. We're now in 2 weeks of delays off of inspection alone. And mind you, we've been in this transaction for 3 weeks. So this is now a 5-week transaction and we're still not done. So like I was saying, the inspection, it only takes about 15 minutes. They're not going to wait for anything because they got to go. They got about 12 other inspections today in 12 other cities. All right. So the property must be move-in ready. That means it has to be clean. They don't want any furniture. I failed another inspection because they got there. Everything was fine. But my client, the landlord, left the living room set in the living room. And there was a couple things in the garage. That failed us. Everything was fine, but those things failed us. So it has to be move-in ready. They want to know, can we approve this inspection and have this tenant move in tomorrow if needed be? The answer will be no in that instance, so they will fail you. All appliances listed must be working. Another reason I failed on another unit, I listed that there was a garbage disposal. When they went to turn on the garbage disposal and test it, it didn't spin. It just went, so it was clogged, failed us. All right. It's better to just say we don't have a garbage disposal than say we have one and it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, don't list it. Just say I don't have it. It's not a part of this. That's how you get out of that. But otherwise, just fix it. Another big thing they'll fail you for, if they look around and they see a missing outlet cover, like, like you can see the plug, but then there's just a hole behind it, failed. It's unsafe. A kid could put their finger in it and die, so they just make sure it's like as safe as possible for children. They put children first when they're thinking about this inspection. Also on that note, if the property has a pool, they will fail your inspection if the pool does not have some form of safety mechanism. It has to have either a fence around it or a cover that you can put on there because they don't want kids playing outside and falling in. So I have had to have holes drilled around the pool because you can't just say I have the fence. They want to come out and see the holes in the ground for the fence to go in it. So you have to actually install it. And if you fail or miss an inspection, they have to reschedule it. And usually this takes a few days, sometimes a week. So it's really important to just be on the inspection process because like I said, this is the most crucial part of the Section 8 process. If you can understand and get around the inspection, you should have no issues with Section 8. This and properly filling out the package, I'll probably say are the two things you have to know differently. That's the end of this training. Does anybody have any questions? I will post it again in a playlist for you guys. Wait a few.
No, not really. You covered up pretty much almost everything.
Awesome. Thank you, bro. All right, man. So that's it. I'm gonna start editing this, and then there should be a log of all of our trainings on the website by hopefully this weekend, Monday the latest, and I'll send you guys that link. Outside of that, yeah, I'll see you guys next week at 3 for the next lecture. I like this.
All right, sounds good. All right, have a good one, man.
Yeah, man. Take care.
You too. Bye.